Hi, y'all. It's Bridget Cutshaw with Real Things Living. Today, my guest is Laing Rikkers. She is the author of Morning Leaves, and she's also the co-founder of ProSomnus Sleep Technologies. Can you say hi, Laing?
Morning, how are you?
Good. I think it's so cool that you made time to be on this podcast because what you're doing is very helpful to people. And I learned, guys, more about what she's doing, about what obstructive sleep apnea is. And that really surprised me. And I think that's what prompted you to even write your book because you have a personal story behind this. Can you dive in a little bit why you wrote
Yeah,
this book and what it's based on?
sure. So I am just about to launch a book in May of 2023 called Morning Leaves: Reflections on Loss, Grief, and Connection. And the book was inspired by the very sudden and unexpected loss of my younger sister in December of 2019. And fortunately, that was my personal life colliding with my professional life. And, as you mentioned, I work I co-founded a business and I'm currently the executive chair of a business called ProSomnus Sleep Technologies that makes um, devices for patients who have obstructive sleep apnea. And my sister had all of the signs and symptoms of quite severe sleep apnea, and I'd been talking to her about trying to get tested and diagnosed so she could get into treatment. And unfortunately, there are very serious cardiovascular ramifications of untreated sleep apnea, and we lost her. So I ended up writing the book really as a way of working through the grief process, and it was very helpful.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of poetry, is my understanding. I
Yes.
haven't read it yet because it hasn't been released, but
Well,
right.
I'll have to get you a copy.
Yeah, have you I just think what you're doing is just so helpful because you're taking something unexpected and you're trying to help so many other people. And I never really heard of obstructive sleep apnea. I've heard of sleep apnea, but not obstructive sleep apnea. And it sounds like you had, when the first time we met on another call, you'd mentioned that you shouldn't ignore snoring, really, right?
Absolutely. So, a little bit of background. So, there are two different kinds of sleep apnea. One is called central sleep apnea, and that's a neurological condition that causes patients' breathing to be interrupted. Um, that is different from obstructive sleep apnea, which is a condition where the soft tissue falls back when a person is sleeping and blocks the airway. And snoring is a result of that and a very common symptom of obstructive sleep apnea. Not all snoring is obstructive sleep apnea, but it is a very commonly correlated condition. And so we always suggest that people who snore a lot get tested from their doctor. It's a fairly easy thing to do a home sleep study and determine whether or not one has the condition.
That's really cool that this technology that we're living in, we're going to help people like this.
Yeah.
And is there while you're talking about the snoring, is there a average age or does it matter what age you are? When I think of sleep apnea, I just think of older people. I mean, that's what we've heard and read. Is there an
Yeah.
age?
Certainly, older people are more inclined to have sleep apnea, although it certainly impacts a lot of younger people as well. It's such a widespread condition, and people don't realize that it's estimated that 1 in 5 adults have obstructive sleep
Wow.
apnea. So it's massive. I mean, that's way more people than have cancer. I mean, just the statistics alone are quite staggering. So it does impact younger people. I mean, for instance, at ProSomnus, one of our largest clients is the U.S. Army, and their soldiers, many of them are young, and they are interested in the long-term cardiovascular health of all of their soldiers, but they're also very interested in the immediate day-to-day performance of the soldiers. And if you have obstructive sleep apnea, you have what they call micro arousals throughout the night, so you don't sleep well. So another common symptom is daytime sleepiness.
Ah,
And so people they don't perform, as we all know, if you don't perform well, if you don't sleep well. And so it has both the effect of, protecting one's cardiovascular system and, but then also ensuring that they're performing well. I mean, things like driving accidents are very, very common,
Oh,
or even if you remember the Exxon Valdez crash, that was associated with the captain having obstructive sleep apnea. So it's very important for people to get treated and find a treatment that works for them. And so we've been working on trying to make a both very effective solution, but also one that patients can adhere to and will use on a nightly basis because it's very important
it
to have
is. So
consistent.
this is something I would think you would recommend, should family, I should say family doctors, but what's the word for doctors that see, should you go see a doctor like that first, or did you see,
Practitioner, or a primary care
right, that's what
practitioner.
I meant to say, right?
Yeah. So that's often the first stop for people. They'll talk to their primary care doctor about the symptoms that they're having, and other symptoms can be, as I mentioned, so it's snoring, daytime sleepiness. They might wake up with a dry mouth. They might sound like they're choking or gagging, and then also depression is very highly correlated with it.
Oh, wow.
So it's worth, if you have, or you or someone you love have any of those symptoms, to speak with their primary care doctor. They can then prescribe a sleep test or send one to a sleep physician who then can, typically those are done now at home. They used to be done in sleep labs. People didn't like the idea of having to go sleep in a sleep lab, understandably. And so there's one of the areas where COVID has been very, very helpful. It really accelerated the development of home sleep tests. And so, a lot of times one can be sent to your house. It might even be disposable, very simple to hook up. And then the data gets uploaded to the cloud, can get diagnosed, and then get sent to a treatment provider. So it should be a fairly seamless thing. It's covered by almost all medical insurance,
Oh,
commercial
wow.
medical insurance, and Medicare. So it's available to people and should be fairly easy to access.
And one thing you had said is cardiovascular. You think that is connected to if you're having heart issues or as a side effect or?
Definitely. So there's a lot of clinical research on that. It can really damage the heart because the heart is having to work so hard to pump the oxygen that it does have access to through the body, and it has, it often is correlated with hypertension, atrial fibrillation, also then stroke, can be diabetes, cancer. There are a number of
Wow, right.
associated with, so that are very serious. So it's worth paying attention to. And unfortunately, people just aren't that aware. And those who are aware are often very afraid of getting a CPAP, which is, the mask. And, there's a lot of it's difficulty for some people wearing it. It can be uncomfortable for certain people. And then also just the social stigmas, people don't often like it. And so even people who might suspect that they have sleep apnea are wary of getting diagnosed because they don't like the possibility of what the treatment looks like. So the treatment that we have at ProSomnus is an oral device. It looks a lot like Invisalign or a mouth guard that you might wear in sports. And it has posts on the upper and lower arch that are set by prescription. The treating clinician identifies where the optimal airway is and then positions
Oh,
the jaw to hold it there so that you're able to get oxygen while you're sleeping.
wow, that I'm just learning so much just listening to you. And it also brought back some memories to me before people that listen to this podcast, listeners know that I've had, cancer and a rare primary brain tumor. And that's one of the things they did. They tested me is for sleep apnea, whatever. And I was okay because I was having these weird symptoms, but it turned out to be the brain tumor that we didn't know until I had the MRI. It was just really weird because I was having headaches, right? And that's what I was asking you. And I had problems sleeping sometimes, but
Interesting.
that brain tumor pushed it's not growing on my brainstem, but it has pushed on it. That makes
Wow.
right.
Yeah,
And so I'm
that's
fine
scary, but
now.
I'm happy to hear that your provider at least was, looking at all the options, including sleep apnea as one of the causes.
Right.
And
She's retired now, but she was really good. She always was. I'd tell her, I'm having this and this and this, right? And then she's like, she was into research, or not, I shouldn't say that, but open to new things. But, and also as the patient, I had to ask questions and be honest, right, of what's going on. That's helpful too.
absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you're doing so well.
Right. And I'm glad I don't have sleep apnea, but still we had a test for it because you just don't know. And that's like you said, people don't really they blow it off. They just think like, yeah, whatever. And it's important because it could have an impact later on. And I guess we'll jump back to your book. I love books, by the way. And I think it's beautiful that you wrote this about your sister. And unfortunately, she passed away. And can you tell me the process, or how long did it take you to write the book?
Well, I didn't set out to write a book. It
Okay.
sort of developed a little bit over time. And so my sister passed away right before lockdown, so in December of 2019. And so in that way, we were fortunate that we were able to, have a funeral and gather our family and friends and be together. But then, shortly after, all went into lockdown and were so isolated. And I had a little bit more time on my hands because everything was sort of slowing down and wasn't having to chase children and travel for work and things like that. So I ended up picking up a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron that's been around for a long time.
Yes.
Um, and I'd heard about it for years and people had spoken really highly of it. And it has 12 chapters and it has you sort of work through a process of exploring your creativity. And that was something that felt important to me at the time, was to figure out how to get some of this emotion and what I was processing out. And so, one of the primary things that she recommends is a process that she calls morning pages, which is a daily practice of writing before doing anything else in the morning, and you write 3 pages. And what I found in that was I started writing poetry. I was spending a lot of time outside. We were walking a lot, and I was feeling very connected to nature. And I live in a really beautiful part of Southern California, and things were blooming, and the sky was extremely blue without any of the pollution. And so I started writing what turned out. I didn't know that they were poems at the time. They were just these sort of entries that I was writing, and I really wanted to sort of, when I stepped back, I wanted to capture them for my kids. I was, with my sister gone, I was very cognizant of how quickly things can go, and really wanting to make sure that my children knew me. Like, I was thinking through, like, had I imparted everything that was important for them to have known from their mom. And I know it was such a scary time, as everyone remembers. I mean, people were, you know, in real crisis globally, and so death was front and center in all of our minds. And so I typed them up, and mostly to first give to them, and then I realized after that there were a number of universal things about being human in the poems, and so started sharing them with some other people, and then wrapped it with an essay about what had happened with my sister and the process that I went through. And my hope is that is helpful to other people who are suffering from some sort of loss. My loss happened to be, a death, but it's certainly applicable to any kind of loss and grief, and the importance of connecting with other people and taking care of oneself.
It's beautiful, and to me, writing is therapeutic, and it's just by itself. You don't have to make it public, and you have the courage to finally, I guess, put it all together, make it public. And I think it's going to be really helpful.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah, I like to say, I have sort of 3 things I like to say, like walk it, talk it, write it. And I think to be able to get outside, I mean, you more than anyone I know that, to understand the importance of being physical and getting outside and getting some of that emotion up and
Right,
out of your body. And then I think the importance of talking to other people, be it friends or a
right,
professional, to sort of work
right.
through it. And then certainly the writing or being creative in some way, I think is really useful. Those three things, they certainly helped me.
I think for some reason, from my background, I don't know why people like push down people are trying to be creative. I think it is very healing in
Yeah,
itself.
I agree. I wrote in the book, I think that the process of taking the emotion that you have, sort of pulling it apart, rolling it around, and then putting it into something creative, empowers you and allows you to sort of recognize what it was and then transform it into something positive and something beautiful. And, that's either it eats you alive and takes you down the tubes, or you have to make peace with it and do something to move your life forward. And I think the creative process is really the best vehicle to do that.
And I think just books in general are just reading books are healing for a lot of people. And I think what you're doing is great. The one book that helped me after my last cancer diagnosis was Seth Godin's book called It's Your Turn. I
Mm,
think, have you ever heard of that book?
I don't know it.
And yeah, it's called It's Your Turn. And I'm like, yeah, heck yeah. Because that's after I wrote my first book based on that. And it was very different. It wasn't poems, but it was a little bunch of different short stories.
Mm,
And I like that. It kind of just makes you think and what are the opportunities out there and just be yourself, I think. And it makes sense. And then
yeah,
nature reminds me to be in the moment, right? You have to
yeah.
appreciate it.
Well, and it's so regenerative, right? I mean, in terms of, you know, be it, the seasons or, different watching nature just continue to come back. It's inspiring, right? If nothing else, you know, you
Right.
see you see all of this life and also realize that you're part of something much bigger and that, your concerns are, in the size of the universe fairly small and that you have to keep things in perspective and keep moving forward.
I think that's beautiful. I mean, it is. We're all connected. We all need to be kind, right? And we have to be, I like to say, respectful. And when something bad does happen, I think it's also good to pause before you react. I've seen, even though bad things happen during COVID, I've seen more people go outside more, and they are appreciating that opportunity now, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it has had a really positive impact in many ways where I see people making different choices for their life. I think both respecting the fact that nothing is can be taken for granted and that life is short.
Yes, it
And
is.
that we have to make sure that we're living each day very consciously and deliberately. And that was very much um, at the front of my mind when I was writing the book that, I wanted to ensure that I was, pausing and appreciating and making the most of each day because, what I saw from my sister's situation was obviously that you just can't count on that. And so it's I do think that that's a positive for people to be able to take away. And I think, some of the slowing down was, pretty universally positive for people.
I liked it actually. I mean, not I'm trying to say the slow as a
Yeah.
reminder to people to slow down, right?
Yeah.
Slow down a little bit. And the downside of what has happened, I think people have gotten the bad drivers were continued. I mean, at least where I live, I'm sorry, just maybe go off that they aren't slowing down. I see some more accidents have been happening for some reason, at least in my area. Yeah. Atlanta. I don't know why that's happening, but we just got to keep putting that message out there to slow down. And yes, I like to run, but I also tell myself, slow down, appreciate the environment that surrounds you. Um, so I guess talking about the book again, did you ever write poetry before this? Or did you know you could?
I hadn't written a lot of poetry. I'd written a little bit from time to time. My husband has studied poetry, and so he and I talked about poetry a fair amount. And then I think one of the things that was most influential was my kids, who are both in college now and sort of relived high school English with them going through it. And um, their writing programs were very different from mine. I went to very sort of traditional schools, ages ago,
Right.
and their the approach that they were taught was much more sort of stream of consciousness, get the words out on, get your ideas out, and worry about the grammar later. Come back and think about that. And it made me appreciate that I really got myself hung up on the how rather than the what. And so, so I think that sort of taking a lot of the lessons that were being taught to them about just express yourself, say what you have to say, put it out there, and don't be afraid. And I had to say those kinds of things to them, and then turn around and remind myself that the same lessons applied to me. And so it was very helpful. I think also the fact that I didn't write it with the intention of it having an audience made it special in that way, that it was really very sort of personal. It's not overly revealing specifically because it's all sort of in the vein of analogies with trees, and so
Oh, wow.
it yeah, so it's fun. I'm really happy with how it came together. And then I worked very closely with an artist, a woman named Kelly Radding, who is a botanical and um, I guess also she does animals and all wildlife um, painting, and she did about 80 paintings for the book.
Wow.
So really, really beautiful. I mean, her work is just stunning, and it was an incredible process. Also, just collaborating with somebody, and we just happened to work together really nicely. And so there's a lot in the art. There's a lot of the symbolism in the art that sort of ties to the words and ties to things that were important, mostly to me, but there are a few things that are really special to her in there as well. And it's meant to be a gift book. It's meant to be something to give to somebody who is, suffering from a loss, and and it's beautiful enough, hopefully, to leave out so that people want to return to it and revisit either the words or the paintings. And so I hope people like it when it comes out. I'm very
Oh,
excited about it.
the way you're describing it, I just can't wait. I'm thinking I'm going to give these as gifts to people because that's what I started doing now with my nephews, and they're adults now, and then they are getting kids. I'm just gonna from the rather than giving toys to the nephews, give books out all the time, and I think that is a great what you're doing, a great thing, and also made me think of we're learning from our children too, right? And
We
it was
sure
my
are.
son, right? It was my sons that's like, Mom, I started a blog and like share. I'm like, I'm from that generation. You just don't talk about you don't talk about things publicly, but it is very healing for those that are listening, reading and writing, and it's not to be, um, you know, I found it to be therapeutic, and obviously Lang did as well. And it's you just gotta acknowledge this bad things, but then you gotta move forward,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. It's funny that you mention our kids. The very first line of my book is essentially, it says, I remember the point of no return, that moment of truth. And it was my then 16-year-old daughter saying, you say you're going to write this book, but are you really going to do it? And she wasn't being rude, she wasn't being mean, she was just reflecting back that I had talked about a lot of things over the years and some of them hadn't happened. And, that held my feet to the fire going through the process because there's a lot of times that you think about backing away or deciding maybe this isn't the best idea, or maybe you have doubts or questions or fears, and her words really kept ringing through my head throughout, saying, no, I have to see this through. I have to, if nothing else, I have to show her that that I'll keep my word on something like this. And so I'm very glad that I did. But to your point, our kids hold us accountable and hopefully make us the best of ourselves.
Exactly, and that's you're being a great role model, and that's your daughter inspired you. I think inspired, right? Or is it motivated? I don't know which word to use, but
Yeah, I don't know, both. She's pretty incredible. So
it's a combination. I just think it's just beautiful what you're doing. And as a book lover, I am definitely going to recommend this book to everybody, just because we all have to, it doesn't matter, like you said, what your grief that you're dealing with, this is going to help. And it might inspire them to write something down themselves. Just click things in your head, and you just got to pause. And I think I love what you're doing, and I love this service that you're helping people to figure out that sleep apnea or obstructive sleep apnea is not something to
yeah,
be ignored, because it's affecting more people than people realize.
yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah, I mentioned that 1 in 5 adults, and it's estimated that 80% of people are undiagnosed. So we all know people who have it, and we also likely know people who have it and don't realize that they have it, and therefore are untreated. So one of my goals for the year is really to try to get the word out and make it easier and more accessible for people.
And for those that are listening, if you have a loved one or a family member or even a friend, well, it's hard to tell if friends are snoring, but to encourage them to get it checked out, and to you gotta not force them, but you gotta encourage them some way
Yeah,
to motivate
absolutely.
them.
Absolutely. Well, and in the back of my book, I have a page on resources where people can get information on obstructive sleep apnea. Also on my website, which is langrikkers.com. So my first and last name.com. I also have resources listed there. So there's plenty of places on the web for people to find information, but I pointed to a couple of spots that I think have particularly good information.
That's really cool. So can people reach out to you on any kind of social media? I'm just curious, or LinkedIn
Yep,
or
absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram. I have an Instagram page for my book that's called morning_leaves_book. And then also I have a Facebook page that's author Laing Rikkers. They can all be found on my website as well. So
that's
yeah.
for those
And
that are listening, I'll have the links included in the description. And I really appreciate your time, Lang. You're really doing a great job. Very inspirational. I find it inspirational, and I'm going to share your book with lots of people.
oh, well, thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show, and really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening, guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.